So, in speaking with Aaron Brown, who's also on the planning board and a peer of mine, he told me about the alternate opening in this position, so I decided to apply for it.
Fantastic. Thank you for your interest. I know Mr. DeTore, he's my neighbor, so I don't have any questions. I know him rather well, so I'll turn it over to the board. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, do you have any questions for Mr. DeTore?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
Sure. Mark, thank you for volunteering or applying. Do you have any experience with permitting in the town, or can you speak to the general process of development? Any comments you'd have on that?
Well, I'm familiar with permitting in town. I did general contract and build my own home here at 3 Little Pine Lane in Exeter about 3 years ago. So I'm familiar with the inspection process, the applying. I do not have any direct knowledge, however, of how the planning board itself is run. So that's why I wanted to apply for an alternate position at first to kind of learn the process before becoming, more involved and active in that, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you so much.
Selectwoman Gilman.
No, I think actually Selectman Brown's question answered what my thoughts were too. I think applying as an alternate is a great way to get into the process and learn the materials that the planning board uses. And I really appreciate you volunteering.
Thank you.
And Selectwoman Cowan, who is also the voting select board rep to the planning board.
Yes, thank you for your application. It's always great to see new people applying for the board. It is a serious time commitment. So I know you've talked to Aaron, who I'm sure has given you a very clear understanding of how much time it takes. Yes. Great. So, well, I think that's wonderful, because I think that we need, new perspectives and new voices. And even if you're just an alternate, you'll still have a opportunity to ask questions and participate. So I think it would be a really great learning experience.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the opportunity. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for applying.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And I agree with Selectwoman Cowan. We will take up your application, and our next meeting is next Monday. And at that point, we'll take up your appointment.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Do I excuse myself from the meeting at this point, or just hang out?
You can watch.
You can watch us, or it's up to you.
Thank you.
Love to have you. Okay. And next we have 3 more interviews for the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee, the first of whom I think we all know, Mr. Lionel Ingram. Good evening, Lionel.
Here. Thank you.
And if you could just, for a minute or so, let us know your interest in taking we're applying for the Stakeholders Committee.
Pardon me, I've lived in the town for 27 years since retiring from the Army. I had 2 tours as a selectman. I've got very strong positive feelings about the Exeter Police Force, but I'm concerned that we continue to move and improve it the best we can. While I was in the Army, I was an Inspector General for 1.5 years, so I have some experience from that direction. And I was also responsible for division training activity, so I got some experience of that. I just would like to have the opportunity to help the chief and the town in general to improve the quality of our police.
Great, thank you. As we've been doing, I'm going to have the 2 select board reps to this committee ask the first question. Selectman Brown, we can start with you.
Sure. Thanks so much for applying. My question is the same for all, but about economic diversity in town. How do you have a sense of policing and with the nature of the different sectors of town, different just different marginalized communities, economic diversity? Yeah.
Well, the problem that we've got, I don't know a lot about the diversity in the town. I do have a strong feeling that the police should behave towards all people in an equal fashion and a fair fashion. I don't think there should be a distinction between one kind of person who has more money or less money, different part of town or whatever. So my view is the police force needs to be neutral in the sense of dealing with the population, unless, for instance, the population is guilty of something or potentially guilty of something.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Lionel. It's great to see you. Thank you for volunteering. My question is the same as well, and I'm interested in hearing what your perception of the police department is in terms of what they are doing well, and then areas that they could improve.
It's hard to judge. I've had no problem with them over the years. I got stopped once for speeding, and that was it. I've had a lot of contact with them individually, especially when I was a selectman. One of the events we had, they were up for a union discussion. So I had an opportunity to deal directly with some of the people. Been a large number of changes, so I don't know many of them. I don't sense a problem, and I'm more than open to find out what problems might exist. I know we had a problem with the difficulty of dealing with with folks who were not fully American citizens, and I'm not so sure why the outcome went negative or positive, whichever way you want to look at it. So I'm a little bit of a novice when it comes to particular issues regarding the police force. I just want to be able to help and learn and help make the right decisions when it comes out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Selectwoman Gilman?
I have served with Lionel on the select board. I appreciate your service to the town. I don't have any questions. I think you'll bring a different perspective than some of the other members. We've been getting a wide response of different things that people bring to this board. And I think because of your history with the administration of the town, that you'll have a different perspective that will add to the conversation very well. So thank you for volunteering yet again.
Thank you, Julie.
And again, I echo that, Lionel. Thank you very much for your service to the town and for volunteering for this committee. We have a couple more weeks of interviews, and then we'll be deliberating and making appointments at that time. So we appreciate your interest in your application in this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Kenneth Mendes. And I'll note by the application that Mr. Mendes resides in Stratham. He does quite a bit of work in the town of Exeter, and I'll let him speak to his experience of what he does in town. I think that since he's here, we'll interview Mr. Mendes, and then when we deliberate all of the interviewees and applications, we can take up whether or not the residency would be an issue, providing that that's okay with the board.
Ken, how do you pronounce your name? Ken, how do you say your name?
Oh, am I unmuted? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, my last name is Mendes, just like you mend something, Mendes.
Okay, thank you. I'm a stickler for name pronunciations, as you know, having a first name like Lovey, so I just wanted to verify. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mendes, good evening. If you could, again, tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in this committee, and thank you for applying.
Right, and please call me Ken. I'm fine with that. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Select Board, and thank you for inviting me. I know I live in Salem, and I'm applying because I think it's an important committee, the Exeter Stakeholders Committee. I'm married with 2 children, 3 grandchildren, 2 in our SAU school district and 1 in the Newton Mass School District. I'm a founding member of and chair of the board of directors of the Racial Unity Team. My volunteer work in Exeter touches many local organizations: social justice, religious, school districts, Board of Education, Exeter Historical Society, Chamber of Commerce, Phillips Exeter Academy, and local businesses, and much more. So I live on the streets of Exeter, put it that way. And I'm a member of Superintendent David Ryan's Anti-Discriminatory Task Force. The task force involved in helping implement Senate Bill 263, which requires our school districts to have a safe place for all people. And it also opens up the opportunity, if our schools are not safe for our children, for the first time in the history of New Hampshire, the school district can be sued by Senate Bill 263. So it's important that in the work I'm doing with with David Ryan and his team to implement processes and have a plan in place to address Senate Bill 263. In my professional career as Global Director of Quality Systems for several Fortune 500 companies, such as Raytheon, Thermo Fisher, Novartis, Hoffman LaRoche, and others, I spent many years of my professional career addressing systemic problems within organizations. And I've approached that issue with a very simplistic what-if root cause analysis perspective. I've helped execute corrective and preventive actions by working closely with those responsible for implementing the remedial solutions. And I have worked on assignments in Europe, South America, Asia, Australia, Canada, and here in the US. My interest in serving in the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee is because of my role in the Racial Unity Team. In my position, I would be able to familiarize the Exeter Police with critical conversations that are occurring in the community. We hear a lot, even before it makes the news. I've read the central the report that was recently published, 132-page. I didn't read all of it, but I focused on one section in the report in particular, community outreach, community policing, and public relations. There were 5 major and 5 other recommendations were made. I'm here to put my expertise to use if needed and to help if any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Ken. It's nice to see you. Thank you for volunteering. I've been asking everybody the same question, which is, what do you see are the strengths of the Exeter Police Department? What are they doing well? And where are areas that they could improve?
Thank you for that question. In a short time that Chief Pullen has been in office, he has done a lot of things and moving in the right direction. I have observed significant visibility of his work and presence in the community. The chief and his staff are very visible, attending community events, hosting community training sessions like bystander training, and attending local community meetings, hosting a police night out, and much more. So he knows that being in the community, and that's very positive because, once you get to have that conversation with him, you feel a lot more comfortable. I've had periodic meetings in his office. This was before COVID-19, where we come together for conversations. And he has reached out to me at least 2 occasions to discuss activities happening in the community. So all of this is positive because he is looking at the community for input as the things he's doing. In my turn, I've reached out to him because of disturbing events that have happened in the town that have been brought to my attention. His presence at public events speaks volumes. As to where he stands on critical issues, that impacts the community, and he has done that in several areas. I was happy to see Chief Pullen go public with an op-ed this summer when some of the PA students were subjected to acts of racism on the streets. I was also happy to see the Exeter Police response to the George Floyd incident. Chief Pullen understands the challenges that diversity, equity, and inclusion presents to his team and the community. Therefore, he has my vote of confidence. He also understands his limitations and the tools he needs to make improvements. I hope that one of the outcomes of the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee would be to help identify those tools that will be needed for better policing and to assure that protocol that was released by the Attorney General on December 9, 2019 for identifying, investigating, and reporting hate crimes and civil rights violations are being followed. So training the police and things like that. So everything he's done up to this point in the short 2 years has been excellent and in the right direction.
So no areas for improvement.
There are some, and they have to do with racial issues. And I can talk about that in the broader sense.
That's fine. That's a good highlight for me. Thank you.
Selectman Brown.
And thanks for applying. My question is about economic diversity, just unique concerns that you think the department has in relation to economic diversity in the town.
Right. When it comes, thank you for that question. When it comes to economic diversity, it relates to Exeter. This is a multi-dimensional subtopic concept. It includes products, work, skills, capability, and the local economy. And increasing economic diversity helps Exeter to weather the storms of economic hard times. The relationship between economic diversity and conditions like crime, housing, and policing is very complex. And crime is likely to escalate when economic conditions deteriorate. Affordable housing needs to be increased when economic times are good. And in times of high unemployment, there will be greater likelihood for criminal activities. What I have seen, given the overall performance of the Exeter Police Department, I do not see this as a need for a significant shift in the policing practices of the Exeter Police Department. The police department is keeping true to their mission, keeping the community safe when it comes to policing. So from that perspective, with the economic growth and diversification and people coming in, the police department has demonstrated that they can handle things, given the staff and things like that. So I would give them an A+ for what they're doing and just keep on the good work there. However, when it comes to incidents of bias incidents and hate crimes, these are on the increase. And what we see is that, in fact, in 2018, there was a 50% drop in the number of hate crimes in Exeter, in New Hampshire, and in Exeter as well. A report recently from the Attorney General's office said 48 departments in the state did not submit any information to the FBI report as it relates to crimes in 2017. So what I'm seeing is that we know from the work I do with the Racial Unity team, I know there are issues going on, but there is no reporting of it. My work with the Racial Unity team does not collaborate the information that I see on the police reports, the FBI reports and the Attorney General's reports. In this community, there exists for years, and as you know, racial issues. Top on the list is the PA-Exeter community relationship that has fostered for years from the time the first Black student was admitted to the school in 1864 to today, where we have students of all shades and colors being the target of racist acts when they are in our streets, in our businesses, in our community. PA presents a major challenge for Exeter, for the Exeter community, and more needs to be done. Exeter has also real estate incidents for people of color. In one particular case, just in 2020, a real estate client was discouraged by a neighbor from buying a home in the Garrison Lane area where homes cost $600,000 or more. The neighbor suggested to the buyer that Epping would be a better community for his family. No, he happened to be Black. I personally investigated the incident and even talked to the buyer. And yes, if you are looking for a police report for this particular incident, you would not find one unless you looked under the trespassing category. So this is some of the reasons why we don't get the information that we're looking for when we look at root cause as to what is happening in a town. You can't find any police reports of racial reporting. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that reporting the event is very difficult. And we need to do a better job of that. There are many things we can do. And I hope that, at least if I'm not part of the committee, at least call me to support it, give some ideas as to how we can do a better reporting. I faced racial incidents in Exeter on the streets. And I said, well, let's forget it. I know I should be reporting it. It's so much trouble to go to the police station to do that. There's got to be an easier way, because for us to attack the root cause, we have to know what is the root cause. Where is it coming from? So this is an area I think that's critical for Exeter. We have too much of bad press on from the students of PEA, leaving and having this bad impression. They spread the word, and I've done my research. I've looked at the Exonian reports of police incidents, of racial incidents. And it dates back to 2015 that I collected a whole bunch. And they all have the same thing. Nothing is going to happen. So I think for the stakeholders committee, this would be a very important topic for them to discuss how we can help improve the reporting. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Ken.
Ken, thank you for the answer. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
It was a very in-depth answer. I don't have any further questions. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thanks.
And Selectwoman Gilman.
So, please, thank you for your volunteering. I'm very interested in your perspective on this committee because of your experience with the Governor's Office of Inclusion and Diversity, and also the relationship we have with the SAU, because that's more than Exeter-wide. There was a question about being a Stratham resident, and as the elder statesman on this panel, in the past we have had members of committees from out of town, the train committee and the transportation committee, I think, come to mind, and we give special permission to people from out of town to participate because of these regional aspects rather than just an Exeter-centric aspect. So I don't have any problem, I don't know about the rest of the board, of appointing someone from out of town to this committee because our law enforcement doesn't just stop at our borders either. We work with other police departments and fire departments across, in our neighborhoods. So that's just from the fellow select board members that it wouldn't be unprecedented to have somebody from out of town to work on something like this. And especially because it's not a regulatory committee, it's an advisory committee that's going to come up with some great ideas for us. So I appreciate your experience and your very detailed answer and your perspective, and I thank you for volunteering.
Thank you.
And thank you for that point, Selectwoman Gilman, which was a good point and a good reminder for the rest of the board. Ken, thank you again for volunteering. Thank you for your insight tonight and spending some time with us. And we have a couple more weeks of interviews, but we'll certainly get back to you as soon as we start deliberating. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And we have one more application this evening, Harry King. Mr. King, are you with us this evening?
Yes, I am.
We can hear you, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
If you would just spend a couple minutes with us and tell us a little bit about you and your interest in this committee, and then we'll ask you a couple of questions if we may.
All right, well, I'll be happy to answer. I've been living here in Exeter for about 8 years now. And I guess maybe I'm best known as the guy who walks up to Exeter Center during the week to visit my wife up there. At any rate, my degree was in social relations, which is a combination of psychology, sociology, and anthropology. And I got into this whole question of the policing a number of years ago, when we were having all kinds of pictures on the TV of that policeman shooting that kind of that. And I was curious about the question of how can we keep that from happening? Because it's been happening rather regularly over the years. We have approximately from 2 to almost 3 times in more frequent shootings of people of color than people who are white by the police. And so I went to work to find out what could be done about it. And in fact, a method has been discovered by a person by the name of Robert Peel. So Robert Peel, you may have heard of the British called policemen peelers, and individual lobbyists in honor of his work. But what he developed was a system of democratic policing, which is quite different from what has been traditional policing in this country that has been authoritarian. The authoritarian essentially is there to threaten people and impose their will so that hopefully they will cooperate with the police. The process of Peel was the reverse of that. He felt that the police ought to go out and really get to know people, and by following their position of rectitude and impartiality, that the people will respond to that. And in fact, the reason Peel actually discovered this was because London was having an unbelievable set of violent crimes that were occurring. And when he instituted his system, which was the reverse system of what had been done previously, they're actually able to get this in control. And actually in England, the police are liked by the citizens and often admired. Well, of course, people when they were back in the 60s, this is the 1960s, were having the riots. They discovered the idea of community of policing with this Peel method, and some of the police reformers tried to bring that to the U.S. and actually that ended up in a program called COPS. And we have been trying to institute in this country, but there's no great effect as yet. The program is gotten in there that has been subjugated in many ways by people who other agendas. At any rate, we have made some success, but we're still considerably way to go. And my interest is such that I have come up with a paper which I'm doing on the subject of eliminating the minority police divide, because having a divided population.
Mr. King, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having a tough time hearing you, sir. Are you speaking over your computer or over a phone?
Is this better? I'm trying to move my mic in front of me.
I don't know about the rest of the board. I'm still having trouble understanding you, sir.
Okay, well, maybe I should speak a little louder. Perhaps that might help. Does that help now?
That's a little better.
Well, at any rate, my interest in policing is that I feel the police are a fundamental building block in a good community. And I think I've put a lot of time working on the understanding the problems that are existence in our society. And I think some of the work that was done by the abuse to our department. One of the things, for example, that I think is very important in the police, and that is the whole idea of the selection of people. And I think that one of the things which has been lacking frequently in the selection of people is people who are compassionate. And I learned something in the process of walking up and down the hill. One of the things I learned was that women are approximately 90% more compassionate than men. I judged that by the people who picked me up. And I thought that one of the things that are really quite important, and that is the selection, I think there ought to be far more women involved in policing. And I would like to see that happen. At any rate, this study has been a major part of my life the past few years. As I say, I would like to be a part of it. And as I say, I hope that I have something I can contribute.
Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf.
I hate to do this, Harry, and your opinion, Chairman, but I think we need to redo the interview.
I was going to suggest having him call in on the phone. Maybe we can schedule him next week because
I think that's best because I don't want to make a decision based off of incomplete information from this interview. So
no, I agree, Mr. King. We couldn't hear you very well, and perhaps we can have you. We can lead off with you at 6:30 next week when we meet, and we can find a way between now and then. We can have our IT people get a hold of you, and we can find a way to do this over the phone so that we can hear you better.
All right. Do you think it'd be better on the phone then?
I just think it would be better because we really couldn't hear you, sir. And Selectwoman Rountree, I echo everything she said. It's not fair to you. We couldn't hear most of what you said. Okay. Well, in that case, let's see if we can work out a system so that I can. We'll reach out to you this week, sir. We'll work it out. We'll do a trial run, and then we can have you ready for 6:30 next Monday night.
We'll work out something then. And my apologies for not being able to.
No, sir. This is new to all of us, so we're working through the issues of meeting virtually. But we'll work with you this week and give you an opportunity at 6:30 next Monday to re-interview.
All right, fine.
Thank you so much for your application, sir, and spending time with us tonight.
Okay, I'm pleased to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, good night.
Mr. Dean, can we have Mr. Glowacki or somebody reach out to Mr. King this week and we can do a trial run via phone?
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of what the difficulties were because Zoom is usually very, very smooth. So I'm wondering what's happening there. So yes, we will definitely do that.
I understood a little bit of it, but not enough to be able to vet an application. Sure. So thank you, Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf. Okay, that's it for our interviews this evening. We can go into our regular agenda. First up is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment, make comments to the select board. We do ask, though, that if your comment has anything to do with what's on the agenda, that you wait till that agenda item comes up. But at this time, I'll open it up to public comment. I will pause for a moment to see if anybody has their hands up.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt for just a second, I was just wondering, because I have the view of the Brady Bunch screen, and it's getting more crowded with more people that are joining us for business that's coming up, that if the folks like Mr. Dettori and Mr. Ingram that are no longer want to listen but are no longer in the conversation until they want to be, if they could be moved to the attendees list instead of the panel list.
Yes,
I'm glad you should disappear.
You need to keep.
She tried to say it in a much gentler way.
I still love you, Lionel.
Okay. There doesn't appear to be any public comment. So we will move on to proclamations and recognitions. We don't have any this evening, though I do have one informal acknowledgement I'd like to make. There's a municipal organization, the ICMA, which is the International City Management Association, that I'm familiar with through my work experience. Many town managers belong to ICMA. And I'd like to acknowledge that I found out last week that they recognized and acknowledged a group of local government professionals, including our town manager, Mr. Dean. And he was given an ICMA service award recognizing his 25 years of municipal experience. So I just wanted to bring that up and congratulate you, Russ, and thank you for your municipal service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a good run, and I've enjoyed it. So I appreciate the recognition. Thank you very much.
So you got another 25 years in you?
Let's see. That'll put me where at that point?
Mid-70s, right?
Time will tell. I guess We'll find out.
Great.
Probably not.
Congratulations to you. Well earned.
Thank you. Thank you, Nico.
Next, we have the approval of our minutes from our September 14th, 2020. If there are no revisions or amendments, I would entertain a motion from the board to approve the select board regular meeting minutes of September 14th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. We do not have any appointments this evening, so we'll jump right into our discussion and action items. First, we have Renee Allen to give us an update on the Pocket Park initiative. Renee was with us probably a month and a half ago. And good evening, Renee. Selectman Brown and I had the opportunity to sit in on her presentation last week, and so I'm excited for the rest of the board and the public to hear Renee's update. So Renee, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Nico. Renee from High Street, Renee Allen. I'm just going to give you a little update here tonight. So here we go. In July, I asked permission to form an ad hoc committee to discuss my Jude Hall Pocket Park idea. This would be a physical commemoration that honors the Black community that once existed in Exeter and their contributions. So I am happy to report an enthusiastic response in my update tonight. I'd like to tell you who is on the committee. It includes myself, David Weber from the Racial Unity Team, Barbara Remkunis from the Exeter Historical Society, Jennifer Martell from the Planning Board, Emma Stratton from the American Independence Museum, Maura Fay from the Heritage District Commission, Dave Short from the Swayze Trustees, and of course, Daryl Brown is a select board rep. So we split into two groups, one for siting and the other for cultural context. Our siting group is in favor of the location at the head of Swayze Parkway, directly adjacent to the Donahue Legal Building that I mentioned before. We think it would be possible to create a nice sitting area there with handicap access for approximately $10,000, which we would crowdfund for the majority, because the profits of my mini mystery books are not going to quite be $10,000. But I still pledge my profits. So we understand that the parkway is in flux at the moment, as it is under consideration to be permanently closed to cars, and also that the Swayze trustees want to draw up a master plan to return it to the original splendor of the 1930s design. So while all that is happening, the Context Group is doing work on identifying members of the former Black community, with special focus on the half dozen or so Revolutionary War veterans, which is why we strongly feel it belongs near the American Independence Museum. The information on the Black community has been obscured for a very long time. So it's going to take a while to get an accurate count if we even actually can. I think it's in the range of about 125 to 150 people over a 100-year period. We're thinking about 1790 to 1890. And then after that, the community is virtually erased down to 0 or maybe 2. So at this point, our ad hoc committee work is still ongoing. But later, we would like to open this culturally significant project up for discussion in the wider community. So I thank you for your support so far. I welcome your comments, and I have one question, which is when we do finally decide what we're going to do, who exactly shall we seek approval from, or what would be the process? Thank you.
Mr. Dean, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Excuse me. Sure. When this process first started, we actually reached out to legal for a quick analysis of the pocket park process. And their recommendation is that the Swayze trustees should be involved with it, but that the board would make the ultimate decision about whether it goes in or not and where. So,
great, thank you.
And further to that, when we met last week, I did tell Renee in the committee that the desire of the Swayze Park trustees to permanently close the parkway is in a preliminary discussion with legal, and we have a ways to go on that, but obviously we'll keep the dialogue open with you, Renee. Any questions or comments for Renee from the board?
I would just say that this effort is in such capable hands with Renee. I'm so happy to be a rep on this committee. I've been really impressed by her diligence in the whole early process of this. So thank you, Renee.
All right, thank you. And one other comment, if there is no other question, is that when we do open it up for the wider community discussion, we will certainly be inviting the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire for their opinions and insight onto the process of how to create, what to create. This is kind of a long-term project, and we're at the very beginning of it. Okay. So thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Renee. We look forward to your update. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I forgot the question that I wanted to ask, which was, what do you sort of what is the envision? What do you envision for the community process? Cultural discussions. What does that look like? Is it going to be a formal committee? Is it just an ad hoc group? What are you thinking?
That's a good question, and that's something that we're working on. We've been looking at some links from other people who have done this kind of thing, to involve all kinds of stakeholders. One particularly was like the University of Virginia. That was a multi-million-dollar project, so it's quite different. But to give us some ideas, so that's one of the reasons why the project will take a long time, is because we want to really get it right. So we're still working on that particular question, and I welcome any input you have as well, Molly.
Got it. Well, if anybody can get it done, it's you. So I echo what Daryl said as well. So thank you so much for this this opportunity to work with you on this.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, next we have a Public Works Director, Jennifer Perry, to give us an update on the water restrictions and also to discuss a draft revision of the town ordinance water use restrictions.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to present to you an update on the drought conditions. I think everybody's pretty aware at this point. We have seen a good reduction since the last time we met and the board enacted the complete watering ban. We have seen a reduction back to essentially May's irrigation levels, or pre-irrigation level, if you will. So that's a great result. Our biggest concern right now, though, is, yes, we are starting to see some rain. We had some early this morning. There's a prediction of anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, and I believe maybe again early next week. But the challenge is, as you know, we're still in about a 9-inch deficit, and it's very unlikely that we're going to completely recover what we need to before winter starts. And once we have frozen ground conditions and precipitation switches over more to snow than rain, we essentially stop recharging our surface waters and our groundwater supply. So I think it's very important that we continue to put the message out about not using water for outdoor purposes, that, we really need to stay focused on conserving it for drinking water, sanitation, and fire suppression. And it's likely that that's going to be the case through to next spring. We'll learn a lot more as this winter goes on as far as snowpack development and what we expect to see for recharge in the spring. But I'm just putting out an early word that I don't see this completely turning around before we hit winter. And with that, and I did provide an update to the memo that I've been giving you regularly, and you could see that last week the drought monitor increased the severity of drought just north of us in the northern half of Rockingham County from severe to extreme. We're right here where we are in Exeter, it's still considered severe, but it all depends on what starts happening over the next few days with precipitation. So with that, I did have one change that I had proposed, and I put a memo together talking about that modification to Chapter 1610, the water use restriction chapter. Do we need to go into any special consideration for a modification to an ordinance? Does it change from public meeting to public hearing, or is that still a public meeting?
So this would be considered the first reading tonight of the water service regulations, which is basically our water ordinance for the town. So we would treat this as a 3-reading situation, and then have the vote of the board after the final reading.
So I did provide a little bit of background to the ordinance. This ordinance, 1610, the water use restrictions, was written back in 2016 when we experienced the last significant drought. And at that time, one of the pieces of enabling legislation that allowed us to restrict watering of residential lawns and private wells, that's New Hampshire RSA 41-11D, only allowed for residential restrictions. Since that time in 2019, as Russ has pulled up, there was a change or an amendment to that legislation that removed the word residential and just speaks directly to water systems, or all water systems, whether they're residential, commercial, or industrial. And it also added the highlighted language talking about exempting the grass playing turf of a recreational field, the grass playing surfaces of a golf course, grass agricultural fields, including fields used for sod protection. And that, again, is to keep facilities that are basically based on a water type of product, and we can't really put them out of business per se. So those would be exempted. And so I took our previous ordinance, Chapter 16-10, and just made a few quick changes. I changed the name from the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. And then in section 16.3, I struck the language all residential. So now it will just say all well users within the town. And on the second page, added the language for what's exempted from the restrictions, the grass playing turf, the grass playing surfaces of a golf course, and agricultural fields, including sod production. And those are the only changes to the ordinance that I'm recommending at this time.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board from Mrs. Perry?
Are we taking advantage of our channel for PSA announcements and really explaining to people to conserve all kinds of water usage?
We've been utilizing as many outlets as we've been able to. We've made quite a bit of use of social media. We've had this running on Channel 22 as a kind of a continuous notice banner. It's on the first or the front page of the town website. We've been in the newspaper. We've been using the programmable message boards out on Portsmouth Avenue. And we've also taken the time we've had quite a few conversations. We've received phone calls. We have received reports from, neighbors or people in areas where they can see watering. And we'll take the time to talk with people that are still watering that didn't understand it. I think we have pretty much everybody at this point. We haven't had any recent reports, I would say within the last couple of days, of continued watering. So it has taken a little bit longer than we had thought to get the message out. As you recall, I think your meeting was on August 24th or thereabouts. And it probably took us a solid 2 to 3 weeks to get the majority of people notified of the reduction requirements.
Thanks. Is there anything else the board can do that hasn't been done yet in support of what you're doing?
I don't think so. Not at this time. I think, obviously, this venue is an important venue. A lot of people do watch the board meetings. And that's one of the reasons why we want to continue to put the message out about the need to continue to conserve even as we enter the winter. I know it won't be on people's, on the forefront because people aren't going to be watering after, this time of year. Pretty much people are done. But it's important to continue to conserve even in the wintertime. Don't take a 10-minute shower. If you can do with a 2 or a Navy shower, even better. But we'll continue to put the information out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you very much. And I will tell you that I have gotten the text push out from, I think it's from the, Bob, you can correct me, the My Exeter app. I've gotten a couple of those, so that's another outlet that we're using. And the other thing is, this is actually that change in the RSA actually went through my committee. So whether it's good or not, you can blame me.
No, I think it's good. Back in 2016 was when that conversation started. And, when we first really were working our first time around with the ordinance and enacting it, we did get questions from the public about, you're restricting my residential use, and yet here I go to get my coffee or my dry cleaning or whatever, and they're continuing to irrigate a very small lawn. Why is that? And I think in fairness to everybody who's doing their best to reduce, it's important that, a minor area like that needs to be restricted. I understand, and I hope that others understand the importance of protecting athletic fields and golf courses, which are a major investment. A minimum amount does need to be used to keep them viable, but it's, I think this is another step towards good conservation efforts.
That was a subject that came up in my committee at the State House about the economics of some of the things, plus, Parks and Rec in our school fields, our public properties that we want to maintain, and so that the students can enjoy them at the quality that they need to perform well. And taking out the residential part, it was made pretty clear from the people that were giving us testimony of the concern about the watershed, and that somebody's private well affects, my public water because our source is running down to the same river. So that's an important thing to note for people who have their own wells, that we're all sharing the same source of water, really.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Perry? So with that, Mr. Dean, we have our first reading this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, Madam Clerk? You're muted.
I'm not going to read the whole entire chapter. I'm going to read the sections that we're changing. And thank you, Jennifer, for putting them in red so I can find them easily. The first reading is the Chapter 1610 Water Use Restrictions. We want to amend 1610.1 to update the Board of Selectmen to read Select Board. In 1610.3, we want to include all residential is crossed out. Residential is crossed out so that it is all well users within town. These restrictions apply to. What is next? And then in 1610.8, we're changing C about, it starts out as commercial car washes, but adding D, the grass playing turf of recreational fields, the grass playing surfaces of golf course and grass agricultural fields, including fields used for the production of sod, may be excluded from the requirements of 1610.2. And I think that's the end.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Mr. Dean, we do 2 more readings of this before we vote, correct?
Yes, we'll have 2 more readings of this, yes.
Great.
I think the next time, or maybe the last time, I'll read the whole chapter, but right now it's an alert.
That's fair enough. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the continuation of our conversation on the proposed Arts and Culture Advisory Commission. We discussed this briefly at our last meeting. I think since then, I've received correspondence from folks in town who are quite excited about the prospect of implementing this commission. I didn't know if, since our last meeting, any of the other board members have had an opportunity to review it, make suggestions, revisions, changes. I don't see any hands up. Selectwoman Cowan, your thoughts?
I have not received any communication asking for changes. I've just received communication from folks who are interested in serving and happy that we are starting something. So I also want to say that, like most committees, there is an opportunity to shape the charge and the scope once everybody gets going. Mm-hmm. So I would be in strong favor of putting this in place so that we can start getting folks who are lined up to apply to serve on the commission and then get going.
Okay.
And I'll just kick it over to Levy. I know you indicated an interest in serving on this, and just excited to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I'm very interested in serving on this board. I don't know what our time frames are in terms of getting the police commission cohort interviews done first. But once we get that done, are we going to start the application process for interested members now, or are we going to do that in the coming weeks?
If the board's so inclined, we can start to accept applications if we agree that we want to implement this commission. And then obviously let's finish up on the police interviews first. But in the meantime, folks who are interested, we can start to take in their applications.
I think it would be great to start taking in the applications so that we at least have an idea of how many people we're looking at, how many people are interested, and it gives us some time to get the word out, because I know that there's lots going on right now, especially with the elections coming up. So I think that would be a great step forward.
Agreed. Selectman Brown, any thoughts?
A general question, commission versus committee, is there a distinction there?
It's a good question.
I think commissions typically have a little bit more regulatory power than a committee. So it all really depends on if you want to be more advisory than directive, I guess.
It's a good question, Selectman Brown. I think that, I look at number 9 in the proposed committee charge where, the group would serve as a liaison with the Parks and Rec Department who will continue to process town permit requests. So to your point, if it's going to be advisory, then, we could consider changing the word from commission to committee. That's a good catch.
Yeah, it really was just, I don't have a dog in the fight. I just have a general interest that I'll ask later about just our overall outlay of committees and how we're managing our spread of committees. So this is an important one for sure. Just I want to, just have a general management question later, I think, as we develop.
Okay. No, I think that seems to make sense. Selectwoman Gilman? I didn't know if you had any thoughts.
No, I think it's we talked about it for a while early on in your election to the select board. And I think it's something that we are missing and we need to fill that hole to collect Exeter in many ways for our vibrancy of arts and different cultural events. So this is a great beginning. And like Selectwoman Cowan said, if after the group starts meeting, they find that they need to adjust the mission, we've already done that with a couple different committees. I have no problem with going forward like that.
Okay.
I would also just note that when we had an arts committee, it was an arts committee. And this, in my mind, is going to encompass more than just, permitting the arts. It's not going to permit anything, but just, serving sort of a bigger function that can move between a lot of the committees that we have already. Because I can, clearly see how this new committee would want to weigh in on the proposal that Renee is bringing up, which is also going to be dealing with the Swayze Park trustees, which is, they're going to want, if we're talking about culture, we're going to want to bring them into the police commission. So how do we encompass all of that? Which is why I am pulled towards commission, but there's no other reason. I don't have another reason.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? So if we want to move forward, I guess I would entertain a motion to implement an Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory, and whoever makes the motion can pick the last word.
I'll give it to Daryl.
I will hot potato that to Levy.
We're just bouncing it all around.
We're just passing it, pay it forward. Bother.
All right, I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I move to approve the establishment of the Exeter Arts Commission. What's the name of it?
We want
Arts and Culture Advisory.
Culture Advisory.
Is it now commission or committee?
Let's leave it at committee for now. So the Exeter Arts
is the inaugural name.
Yes, the establishment of the Exeter Arts and Cultural Committee as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown. We didn't hear you.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I think this is a positive step forward for our arts and culture in this town. And Mr. Dean, we'll just clean up. There's two places I count where it says commission. We can just change that to committee, and let's start soliciting applications.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Great, thank you. Next, my favorite time of year, it's budget season. So So the Budget Recommendations Committee will be presented with the draft budget this Wednesday night. And as is typical, Mr. Dean, who's been working with the department heads very hard for the last couple months, will present an overview of the draft to the board tonight. Just as a refresher to the Select Board, the Budget Recommendations Committee will start again Wednesday night when Mr. Dean presents the draft. The respective subcommittees will start to do their work, and it's endless hours of work with the respective departments that they're assigned to. There are meetings scheduled starting in the middle of October. That is the first one is an all-day meeting. Of course, these will all be done via Zoom this year, which will be challenging but exciting, I think. And then through November, Budget Recommendations Committee meetings are scheduled. Select Board representation is not mandatory, but it's suggested. If you have it in your schedule and you can sit through the Zoom meeting, that's great. If you cannot, but you can go and watch the archive, that's great. Again, not mandatory, but it gives us an opportunity to see and hear some of the vetting that the Budget Recommendations Committee does and changes and revisions. Sometime in early December, the BRC chair will give formal recommendations to the Select Board, at which time the budget at that point will be in our hands. Over the course of several meetings between mid-December and early January, we'll have an opportunity to bring the budget back to the agenda. We can make suggestions, have discussion. Each of us can add or make recommendations to add or subtract. And then ultimately, the third week in January is the annual public budget hearing. After that, we have a deliberative session in February, early February, and then, of course, the budget goes to the ballot in March. So with that, Mr. Dean, I know Doreen's here as well. I'll turn it over to the both of you to give us an overview of the budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'd like to do, Nico, is it possible to share the screen? Can I do that without any particular issues from board members while we go through this?
I think it might be wise to share the screen. If the board will indulge me, though, when Mr. Dean does that, I can't see your virtual hand. So if you could just be patient with me if you have questions, certainly we'll take all of them. But if I don't see you right away, it's because I can't see the blue hand. But go ahead, Mr. Dean.
Okay.
Just so you know, Nico, you can also exit from the full screen and then do both.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll work on that. Thanks.
And the other thing I would recommend, Mr. Dean, if you could enlarge your screen as much as possible, because it's really hard to see when it's, at 100% if you can zoom in.
Well, we'll experiment a little bit tonight and kind of see how it goes with it. So I will start out by saying this is, as we know, this has been a fairly, with COVID-19 and the impacts that it has left, we certainly have had a lot of interesting discussions about the budget going into next year. And when we put together the initial requests and Doreen and I met with the departments, there were some trends that we were focused on right away. And one was the fact that we were going to really lock it down to not not allowing departments to ask for any new positions. So we're going to start right from there. Unless, and the one real exception to it was if there was an alternate source of funding that came up, we might consider that as a separate deal. So that was definitely one of the things that we were emphasizing right out of the gate. The other thing was looking ahead to 2021, we're still talking about how unconventional life might be in 2021. So usually a normal year for us, we would be attending training, seminars, conferences to some degree out of state and things like that. And this coming year with the budget, we really ratcheted everything back as far as any kind of national conference or something that was beyond the New England region. So this budget was developed with that in mind as well. We do have some expense increases in the budget this year. Overall, right now, the general fund budget as it's coming in is actually lower during its first go round than it normally is. Normally, the board would see a budget increase anywhere from, I would say, 3 to 5% out of the gate. This year, it's coming out of the gate at 2.19% for next year, so the number's lower. There are a few different reasons for that, one of which is, as you go through our budgets, I think the departments have been very diligent in putting together their requests. They really understand the climate that we're in right now and are trying to make things work the best way that they can. And so, again, through this initial cycle, you're seeing reductions in certain line items and so forth that you may not be used to seeing in prior years. And again, that's a result of those conversations and really trying to send the message that we understand as an organization what the climate is, and we're trying to do our best to sharpen our pencils given what's happening. So with that, I will pull up, hopefully, let's see here, just looking for the packet. So I'm sharing this now. And Julie, to your point, I think this screen is as big as it can get on my desktop. So I don't know how big it is with you. I know these numbers, on the revenue side, the numbers tend to be lower anyway, smaller, just because of the way the sheet is. But I'll quickly cover the revenues with you. The key categories: land use change tax, we have estimated at 50,000. For FY21, we've got 65 in so far this year on a project. You just approved the land use change tax warrant for that, so we felt comfortable we could estimate 50,000 for 21. The next two categories are steady as they have been in prior years. The payment in lieu of taxes is actually the housing authority payment to the town that they make every year. And then we have some small tax revenue streams, jeopardy tax. That's when a mobile home is going to be moved and they have to pay the tax before it gets moved. And then excavation tax is just what it is. There's a tax on, if you're running a sand and gravel operation, you're pulling a certain amount out of the ground, there's taxes with that. We did reduce interest and penalties down. You can see typically in 12/31/19, 181,000 was our actual number. But looking ahead and looking at that number this year, we revised it already to 115,000, down from our original 180. We felt comfortable pre-COVID 180 was going to be achievable or likely to happen. But since that time, and with some of the changes we've seen, we reduced that number down. We left the motor vehicle permit fees steady at $3,080,000. Obviously, that's a big revenue stream for us. So we left that alone because we've seen good returns from the town clerk, and that we've bounced back and things seem to be on their normal course that way. For building permits, we dropped from 350 to 2 in our revised estimate for FY20, and we've kept that 200 going forward into FY21. Town clerk and other fees that's fees coming out of the clerk's office, 210,000. We feel we can keep that. And then we get into the state categories, which are state general revenue sharing, and that's something that Selectwoman Gilman, in her role as state rep, was very helpful in getting that reestablished and down to the cities and towns. And also we have the meals and rooms tax, which is 779,375. That's our distribution. And then the highway block grant, 311,502. So we've kept those the same for FY21, and we haven't revised them down in FY20. I think I told you at a prior meeting, the governor has committed to these numbers for FY20, and we're working to try to make sure that they're committed to for FY21, but it's a little bit of a wild card right now, and there's not a lot of surety around this number in particular, the 779. So nobody's got a definitive answer, but I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the state budget process unfolds. Other categories, income from departments, we've reduced that down by 75,000 from $1,075,000. You can see the actuals just a little over that from FY19. We've reduced that down to $1 million as a result of just some lost revenue locally that we are not anticipating we get back, or some fees that may not be as robust as they were in 2019. Interest income, Doreen has talked about that in the past during her quarterly financial reports. You can see that in 2019, that number was really robust and strong because we went to Citizens Bank and negotiated a better interest rate on our accounts, which was really pushing that. But since that time, it's dropped, and they've come back to us and said, okay, we can't offer you that same interest rate. So we reduced the interest income from this year down to $55,000. And then going forward in FY21, we've reduced it to $55,000 as well. The next two categories are smaller categories: town rental and miscellaneous income. We've reduced that down to $5,000 because we are no longer renting the 149 Kingston Road house, and so we won't see that revenue. And then the charitable foundation, we've kept at the same number. That's money that we get. I believe it's for Founders Park, and we do sort of an in and out with it. We bring it in and then we spend the money out of the parks budget to keep that maintained. The Interfund Transfers, this is the EMS fund transfer that we typically have, and then we have another transfer in from trustees of trust funds. That's for the sick leave, and also for the sick leave trust, it's reimbursed back, and also the snow and ice. We budget that, so we budget to get that $50,000 in. And last category is $700,000 of fund balance. We have used that in the past. We've been doing that the last couple of years, and we're scheduled to do that again in FY21. And I also wanted to add that in the revenue structure, you can see as we revise the revenues for FY20, and we have this new number down at the bottom, it's $297,500 less than what we had originally budgeted for back in March. But below the line, I call it, you can see that we've received $362,000 from the Gopher. We have also online $120,000 from the Health Trust that we anticipate being returned in October. And then we have some FEMA money, $17,006 so far. This doesn't include any elections revenue, but we'll account for that later. But we do expect to get some of that back as well. So I also identified the first responder grant that came earlier this year out of another bucket from the state. That's offset by expenses, so I didn't really include that as sort of additional revenue. But these categories up here are what you would call sort of unanticipated revenue. So even though we've reduced our projection down by this number, we have this number coming back. So our revenues are steady. And I would add to that we just had our closing conference with our auditors last week on our draft audit, and our unassigned fund balance is at $5.1 million in the general fund. So from a stability perspective, the auditors were very good. And I do plan on getting that to you when it gets finalized. We're just in the final throes of having the management letter finalized, and then I'll have it in a packet and we can have a conversation. Melanson Heath, our auditors, met with us. Ed Boyd is our lead auditor at Melanson Heath, and we had our conversation about the audit last week. And when we do have that closing conference and I have Ed come in, Zoom into a meeting with you, obviously the board free to ask any questions about the financial statements. So that's the revenue side of the equation at this stage, is where we are. On the expense side, I'll just go down and I'll try to be a little bit broad in my strokes here to not take too much of your time. But basically, as you see the department budgets line up here, you can see that and they're also, I should tell the board too, there's a narrative that comes with this. It's just getting the final polish on it tonight. And then we will distribute it out, and we'll have all of this information on it for you to review as well. But in the general government category, the big decrease is right here in elections registration, because we're only going to have one election next year, as opposed to our steady diet of elections this year. Also in human resources, we've budgeted the reclassifications at $1 for FY21, instead of giving that budget any funding for next year. So that's a reduction there. The moderator budget is down in correlation with the fewer elections. And then the town clerk is up by 2.83%. So that's general government is overall, that's down. Now, I will also add that health insurance is in a reserve account right now. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see it. We budget it right here. This is the 8.1% increase in health insurance. And what happens is when we get the actual percentage, we reallocate everything back to the departments individually. So that's what we will do when we get that rating, and that happens in October. The finance budget, there's a decrease in assessing and also in tax collection for those budgets. Those are just line item reductions. In the tax area, we brought down education training. Again, when you see these reductions, some of them are related to the fact that we feel will be virtual next year, and there's no travel involved, no travel reimbursement. Things like that are resulting in a ratchet back of some of those lines. There's also not as much munis training scheduled for next year. So those of you who are here may remember we added some funds for munis training. We won't have them next year. And then assessing is down because we had a one-time expense to upgrade the vision system. If you remember that, the capital outlay expense, and that's out. We are in the midst right now of negotiating a new contract with MRI for next year. So we're looking at, if there are things about that contract too, I wanted to ask the board if there are specific things that you think are important to that, let me know. But we're trying to work out like a best arrangement for the assessors, whether it's on site, is it remote, and those sorts of things. So we're working our way through that right now. So overall finance is down 2.12%. When you get into planning and building, that reduction in planning is mainly due to the impact fee study, which was a one-time expense that was completed this year, won't be in the budget for FY21. So that brings it down. Economic development has cut out their intern and also any travel down. Building is up slightly. That's a pretty bare bones budget anyway. So you're just talking about wages and benefits. And then the boards and committees and commissions we just budgeted them, we level funded them. And that's sort of what you're seeing is the typical budget, what we had for FY20 for those groups. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Russ, about IT. So we don't expect IT to go up?
So we've been talking about that. And if I go to the IT budget, which I'll sort of scroll quickly down to it. You can see in IT right here, contract services. So this is down. That is because we have funding in the FY20 budget for a one-time, we call it an IT audit. Again, for people that were here last year, you know that we look to hire a consultant to do that. We still do want to implement that. But that won't be in the FY21 budget, so that number is down. You also see an internet services drop, and there'll be some narrative on that as to why that decrease is taking place. I think it was a bump up and then it's back down. You do see here that email filtering and archiving is a new, basically we moved some money to a different account and renamed it because the way things are working now, we need a more robust email filtering and archiving system. We're sort of not cutting it that way. We're not as robust as we are, so that money has been put in there for a request. There's a couple other equipment drop for a one-time. I think we did some security upgrades that aren't in the FY21 budget. So when you wash it all through, basically it comes out to just about a level budget from last year. So I have been told that in these internet services that we will be able to continue our Zoom subscription and afford that. But IT is always a robust discussion at budget time. So if you have ideas about that, we're ready and willing to listen to them as well. So, but this is all the subscription pricing for our app and also for our website as well. So that's all in there. So I'm going to go back up. And I think I was here, police and fire, communications and health. So this is obviously a big part of our budget. And for those of you who are new to the town budget, basically Our budget represents about 24% of people's tax bills, so that's always a good, important statistic to put out there. Our current share of the tax rate is $5.72 per thousand of the 23-27 total rate. So again, that's works out to about 24%. So we provide these level of services for that 24%. Police budget is a 0.37% increase. Very conservative budget. They have made some adjustments in staffing on the administrative side, secretarial support, admin support. So that has brought that budget down some. On the fire side, those are mainly wage and benefit changes to that budget. One of the things that's happening in public safety with police and fire, and more so on the police side this year, is a big increase in retirement assessment. So that's happening July of 2021. Both of those will see an uptick in the percentage of retirement costs. So we, as the employers, bear a share of that 100% now. That's why those budgets are what they are. And then communications is down, and health is down as well. The reason the health budget is down is because James Murray, who I think is on the call tonight, has done a really good job working on our mosquito control program, and he's been negotiating a change in that price. And so that's where we are at with that, and we think we can build that into next year's budget as a reduction. So that's why that is down. Public Works General Fund, moving on to that. Overall, the budget's down $62,718. If you look at some of the department level spending, admin and engineering, there was a $25,000 project on initial design of the highway garage. That is no longer in the FY21 budget. That's actually a CIP item this year. And then highways and streets, there was $100,000 taken out of the paving budget for next year, and some other line items that were reduced. I think dam maintenance is one of them. Snow removal, we reduced a little bit, mostly in the contract plowing, but again, that's a real wild card number. You see, here's 19,465 in actual spending. Here's the 2020 budget. Here's what we've spent year to date, and here's what we came up with for 2021. So the number is pretty consistent. And then solid waste disposal, there's an increase in the blue bag line item there. We're actually seeing more blue bags being used, and so we need to budget that appropriately. Obviously, a revenue offset that comes into the general fund on that. Streetlights, when we went over to LED street lighting 2 years ago, we anticipated we'd be able to keep the budget level, so that's what you're seeing there. And then the stormwater budget, we cut back by about $6,000 to just do a little bit less consulting work on our EPA stormwater permit next year. So that is the Public Works General Fund. Any questions on that? Okay. So we go over to maintenance, and maintenance is our town buildings, our maintenance projects we've kept level funded. The general budget is up in maintenance by 5.53%. One of the big reasons for that is that we are budgeting for COVID expenses. So things that we just don't know, we can't anticipate. We've put, I think it's $11,000 in the budget, $11,000 to $15,000 in the budget, just to be on the safe side, because again, we just don't know what we'll be faced with. So we did create a new line item for that. And then the other budgets are pretty self-explanatory. We anticipate having a new fuel contract shortly. Jeff's been working on that. Jeff Beck, our maintenance superintendent. Our current agreement expires September 30th, so the timing is good. We think we can get a really good price on that. And then just today, we actually got a note from our electric supplier that is talking about signing us up to an extension at 6.99 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, we're at 7.75, I think, through November of 2021. So we've got an opportunity there, and I can bring that back, but it looks like the pricing is going to be really good there too. Welfare and Human Services is mainly level fund. The human service agencies have requested, like they normally do, each year they request increased funding, a few of them at least. and our Human Services Funding Committee has gone through the applications with my assistant Pam, and they are recommending this number to start for the year, 106,720 for Human Services. So, and that's a number of different agencies that make up that request. Any questions? Okay, so Parks and Rec, going down to Parks and Rec, Julie, you wanted to ask something? You're muted.
I'm looking at the packet on my own, and then I hit the wrong button. I hit everybody. Okay. I just wanted to ask about the social services and the welfare. Mm-hmm. Where in this whole process are we, I don't know, guesstimating or I don't know what the right word is, but or planning somehow for the unknown of how long this pandemic is going to affect our services? Because and welfare have been really pushed for people that, you know, have lost a job or their rent is gone, and we're now going into winter. And I know the numbers look like we haven't spent much compared to last year, but, you know, this is only through August 31st. I'm just concerned that we're going to not have enough, I guess.
Yeah, and again, when we talk about the welfare budget, generally speaking, where it is like the snow and ice budget, right? You don't know necessarily what you're faced with until you're faced with it. So it's hard to say and it's hard to predict. And all we can really do is track what we see so far. I know, you know, Pam is very diligent, just like her predecessor was, in terms of using outside agencies to help support the infrastructure. And so far that seems to have worked. I can't speak directly if it's, you know, CARES Act funds or federal funds that have helped plug that gap. You've got the Housing Relief Fund we all know about, right? The millions of dollars that were set aside there. So it could be that some of that is having a positive impact, but the point's taken. It's just hard to predict. I mean, one of our big for rent and hotel,
right? And
you can see here that even through August 31st, we're already 40,756, I think, or that's an 8. So we're already, and we were at 53 last year. So we're, you know, we'll probably break that one. And when that happens, we just have to rob Peter to pay Paul, or we have to try to find outside agency help, which we do anyway, like the Wentworth Trust, to help us with these expenses. So that's what we can continuing to do, and continuing to monitor this budget as winter, as you're right, as fall and winter come. So
one of the things that I've been involved in is going to be involving the different social services that are out there, but because of the pandemic, they all closed down for at least, you know, since March. So there are people that needed shelter for, you know, a day, a week, or whatever, and there's just no place for them to go because the shelters were all closed. So then, because the town is by state law has to provide these kind of services, we were putting people in hotels for a night or two. So that's where the, you know, adding up starts to come in. And, you know, I know it's all unknown. We don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. We don't know how soon the emergency declaration is going to last. And it's just hanging in the back of my head that somehow we have to have some buffer somewhere. And I don't know. I don't know how much.
Yeah, and I think those are all reasonable points, and this is probably one of those accounts that we'll focus on during the process, I'm sure. Because at 45,000, I okay. To where we were. Try to finish up. So just getting into other culture and recreation, this is the Christmas lights budget, the holiday parade, the fireworks, We have kept money in there for 2021 for fireworks. Hopefully that'll happen. The brass band money is in here as well. So this is a pretty small budget, but it's an important one that covers a lot of things. Swayze concerts are in here as well. And so is the Swayze Park maintenance budget that is funded out of our general fund. It sort of landed here. I don't think that's in maintenance, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Moving to library budget is up 4.5%. And this budget, I always remind people that this budget actually doesn't come through us. It comes through the library trustees. It becomes part of our budget overall, goes to the ballot that way, but they're the ones who make the proposal initially. So that budget is reviewed by the budget subcommittee of the Budget Recommendations Committee. But that budget was put together by the library. So that's what they submitted for this year for the preliminary budget. Debt service and capital, as we get into debt service, right here, this increase in debt service is related to the library renovation addition. So we'll be making our first payment on that in the FY21 budget year. So that's really the major driver of the increase. We've had some retirement of debt service as well, but there have been smaller issues. So this is not the actual number of the library debt. It's higher than that. But some offsets have come into that budget that have reduced the increase by a little bit. So, and they anticipate that'll be finished by May 2021. That's the target date. Hope tells me she expects it to be done if materials keep coming in and they don't have supply chain interruptions. For our vehicle and equipment leases, that's $396,615. That represents a large chunk of that is fire-related, ladder one, and one of the engines is about $200,000 of that $400,000 number. So that's actually decreasing by 4.87%. The other thing to know about this budget is that we have not, other than 2 hybrid cruisers, we have not included any vehicle capital requests in here. One item of discussion is going to be during the budget. I've actually asked for $10,000 to work with a consultant to do what I would call a town vehicle and heavy equipment audit, and sort of look at how we're using our vehicles and equipment, the kinds that we're buying, what our policies are around vehicle use and equipment use. We had a fleet study done back in 2009, but it hasn't really been updated since then. So my feeling is before we go too far into vehicle replacements this coming year, especially with the climate we're in, that maybe we take a step back and look at what we have and assess it and see if our best practices we think are the best practices and those sorts of things. So that's that number. So overall debt service and capital with the library payments up 20.24%. Then we get down to benefits and taxes. These are townwide expenses, workers' comp, unemployment for all our departments, except the library. Those things are allocated out to the library and also to water sewer. And then our property liability insurance for the general fund. So overall, when you get down to the bottom line request, FY20 budget 19,605,537, FY21 20,035,290, or 2.19%. Any questions? I'll just keep going. If you want to interrupt me, feel free. On warrant articles, when we get to warrant articles, there's 2 customary ones that we normally have: sick leave and snow and ice. The Parks and Rec Capital Reserve Fund, we dropped down to $41,350 from its $100,000 amount, so cut that back a little bit. We have an old project like we had with Great Bridge that has a deficit in it, the Stewart Park seawall. So we would do a funding for that just like we did with the Great Bridge deficit, and that would wipe that off of our books. It's being reserved right now as committed fund balance. And so again, that's an in and out that we would be able to, improve our financials if that gets funded. The facility garage, public works, that's a big one, $150,000. That would continue that design process. And then the public safety alternatives analysis, and these two projects have been something the facilities committee has been very involved in so far. And the public safety alternatives analysis number right now is sitting at $200,000, and that would create a template for moving forward with the new public safety facility. So it would look at land availability, it would look at various types of buildings, whether it would be a single facility, multiple facilities, what it would look like. So that's what that money is for. Then we have the bike and pedestrian master plan, and then the waterfront seawall project. And again, these are things that are all in the CIP. So when we get to the broader discussions, if you look at your CIP, they'll give you descriptions of all these projects. Then the bond issue, the one bond issue we're looking at potentially for 21 would be the Salem Street Area Utility Replacements Project. Public Works believes that they have that designed out, and they have been talking about having a public meeting on it for some time, but hasn't quite happened yet, but will be happening soon. And so that is really the bond issue that I feel like is most ready to go for a specific project. It is not, it carries a price tag that you'd expect. It's $5.5 million project, but it's general fund for drainage, roads, water, and sewer. So it's got all the different elements to it. And so what you're seeing here is just the general fund portion. And so if we went forward with that, it would be a bond issue. And that's everything for the general fund. Doreen, did you want to add anything, or at this point?
No, Russ, I think you've covered it pretty well, unless anyone had any specific questions.
Okay. So water, sewer, these are two larger budgets. Water right now is a 6.5% increase. A lot of that comes from the fact that we're going to be paying our first payment for the groundwater surface water assessment in this particular budget. And then in the distribution budget, there's an increase for metering replacement. So those are the highlights there. I mean, that's really the nuts and bolts of the increase. Some of the bigger issues on the water side have to do with the warrant articles, and the groundwater source development is in the CIP. There's a request to clean out the lagoon, which is next to the surface water treatment plant. It has not been cleaned out in several years. And that was actually a budget item for $30,000 in our FY20 budget, but now the cost of doing that work is ballooned up to $275,000 because we can't move the sludge into our own sludge lagoons. We have to clean it out and transport it, so that cost has gone up. Also, the department has requested some money for surface water treatment plant upgrades. One is the river pump station over at Gilman Park in need of a new pump, and then some work at the plant itself, including some coating of some clear wells. Everybody knows our surface water treatment plant is very old, needs maintenance and upkeep on a regular basis. So we look to do that. And then this is the Salem Street allocation for those utility replacements. Going down to sewer, most of the increase in administration is due to EPA permit activity. I think the board knows we just came out of our consent order. We're still under it, our AOC, but EPA has issued a new permit, so we have a whole, we're working with Adam Dumville. He's going to do a presentation soon for the board, but we've been coordinating with Newmarket because we both have the same AOC, and we've been working on issues related to the permit with Adam and with the other cities and towns that are involved in that same process. Here, the large increase is in collection for sewer. It's escaping me right at the moment exactly what that is, but I think I can pull it up here. Bear with me for just a second. Yes. So this is the large-scale increase in the collection budget is dredging of Clemson Lagoon. So next to the mills, and that's an initiative that's $75,000 to do that work. So DPW will talk about that more during the process. The treatment budget in sewer is actually down 86,552. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we've had the new facility online for 12 months now, and we have a good handle on the electricity budgets and the solids handling. So we've got 12 months of experience to draw from, so we can ratchet back the estimates on that somewhat for FY21. And then here, the debt service budget is the next payment, not the first payment, but the second payment on the wastewater facility. It's actually a decrease in the payment in the second year. Still a big ticket item, obviously, but that drops the debt service budget down to by 14%. And then capital outlay is level with last year, and there are a few projects that the sewer department is looking to do. Actually, one of them is to replace the inspection, the camera that televises the lines, and that's an $80,000 capital expense. So overall, the sewer budget is $7,034,980. It's a $651,625 decrease from FY20, and the percentage decrease is 8.48%. On the sewer side of capital items, you've got the utility replacements for Salem Street, which we talked about, and then there's also the lagoon sludge removal project spread out over 2 years in the CIP. But one of the things I'd recommend we look at is, should we bond all of this upfront and then look to pay it back? Because the interest rates right now, as we saw with the library, are so favorable. And I just think it's worth the board considering doing that work in full. So if you do, 2.6 million, you're looking at 260 plus interest for a 10-year note. And right now, 10-year notes are, I think they're under 1%. I think they're actually at 0.86%. So it's basically, it's almost free, and you get all the work done. So it's not a free expense, but it's free in terms of interest. So that is the bulk of my presentation. The line items are all there for you to look at. Like I said, we'll have a narrative to people out tomorrow that goes with this. And I think I'll stop there and just take any questions anybody has.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any questions? I have one. Russ, if you could just clarify on the no new positions, are we going to replace any existing open positions? Or how are we going to handle that?
Right now, we have budgeted positions that are vacant, that we have not filled. We have authorized the filling of a couple of positions, like the HVAC plumber is one of them, over at Public Works, but we have held others vacant. I think the chief has also been authorized to fill an officer position, and the assistant fire chief number 2 is still open at this time as well. So, but all of those positions in terms of budget are in the FY21 budget at this point.
Thank you.
Russ, just once more, it was an 8.1% healthcare increase?
8.1% is a speculative number. It's not, when we get rated in October by the Health Trust, we'll have our actual percentage. Right now, we're planning 8.1 because that was the latest number we were presented with at the July retreat as far as the January to December pool. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question about the budget necessarily, more about the process. So I know we just appointed Kathy Corson to the BRC. How many other slots open do we have in the event that there's somebody listening who would like to participate in how we craft our budget?
I think there's 2.
2? That's what I thought.
I think so.
And I know in speaking with Chair Kelly of the BRC a week or 2 ago, I know he'd be very open to filling those 2 slots, because right now he's got committee members who are serving on multiple committees just because of the open positions, and it is a lot of work. speaking personally, the subcommittee work it's endless hours. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a great request, Selectwoman Cowan. If there's anybody out there interested in serving, it's essentially starting now through the end of November, maybe early December, and that's the bulk of the work. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, but it's for a short period, and it is rewarding. You get to see how the town operates. I mean, you learn about the operation of the town through the budget.
And as we all know, a budget is essentially the roadmap of our priorities. So if you care about our priorities, this is a really great way to get involved.
And certainly I'm excited about the perspective. I know Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, you spent many years on the SAU Budget Committee, and then certainly Selectman Brown and your previous experience with Plymouth. So, your new perspectives will be great once we get the budget in our hands in December.
And I'll even put a marker down, Mr. Chairman, because one of the things that has come through, and actually Lovey was the one who brought it my way, and I think Daryl too, was looking more in depth at DocuSign as a method to improve our electronic ability to sign documents, which again, with COVID, we've got so many of these workflow issues that have kind of cropped up. And so we're actually looking at that. The city of Lebanon uses DocuSign religiously, and they speak very highly of it. And so we're actually talking with them right now just to get some details about their contract and what the costs are and so forth. So you may see that in the subcommittee discussions.
Great. Okay, seeing no other questions, Mr. Dean and Doreen, thank you very much for a thorough report, and I'll look forward to Wednesday night's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we reached our point in the discussion action items, our weekly COVID-19 update. We have a couple of different respective staff to speak to COVID-19. Chief Wilking, you're right in my view, so we'll start with you. Good evening.
Oh, I end up in your view every week. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to take a couple of seconds. I didn't want to distract from the water restrictions, but I just want to let the board know the fire department realizes that we have the potential to be a very large water user when we're all trying to conserve. So, we did a quick audit today. Our static water sources around town are not looking great. Those are the small ponds that we have to draw water in the more rural outlying areas. We've added mutual aid tankers, 3 tankers in surrounding communities on every alarm of fire. So the first time and the second would bring in tankers. And we do have cisterns that are full around town, mostly in some of the developments north and west of Exeter, but we've identified them as well as reluctantly, we will draw water from the river. We have a source behind Water Street down near the boat launch that we've tested today, and we'll continue to work with Public Works on. And like I said, we don't like using brackish water, but in understanding that we could easily pull a couple 100,000 gallons out of a water tank that we need to use for potable drinking water, we're trying to be responsive to that. So I just want to let the board know we're being proactive on that as well. So on COVID, the last 2 weeks has kind of I'm singing the same song. It's same old, same old. We've had 12 residents of Exeter test positive in the last 2 weeks. We went from 54 to 62. James and I have been in contact with DHHS, and we're constantly monitoring. There's a couple of locations in Exeter that we've identified 1 or 2 positive cases. DHHS is not convinced there's an outbreak, although we are monitoring just to see and do all the contact tracing to make sure that people are notified. So, I'd like to have great news, but it's not great news. 3 fatalities in the state in the past 2 weeks, 2 of which are here in Rockingham County. So we continue to need to be diligent. I put a little note in my report that that we really need to continue to focus our efforts on having people social distance whenever possible. The cold weather is going to drive us inside fairly soon. Wearing a mask or face covering and washing and all that needs to really stay forefront on people's minds as we enter the fall and winter months. Otherwise, we're just going to let our guard down and we could see some further reversal. The other thing I just want to bring up to speed on is emergency management, police, public works, health. We're all looking at the upcoming holiday seasons. I know some might argue Halloween's not a holiday, but it's a lot of fun for the kids anyway. And from Halloween through Thanksgiving into Christmas, there's a lot that typically goes on in town. And we're having meetings with that. And I know I'm going to let James talk one-on-one on the whole trick-or-treating thing and where we are with looking for some guidance there. But I just let you know that all of the departments are working together, and we're going to try to create a cohesive strategy of what we can do and what's safe for the town to do in the coming next few months. With that, I'll turn it over to James, but I'll be here to field any questions that somebody might have.
Well, before we do that, Chief, Selectwoman Cowan had a question for you.
Hey, Chief. Quick question about fire restrictions. So I know we're in an extreme drought. It's concerning to hear that the water levels are low around town. What does that mean in terms of outdoor fires?
What the governor and his proclamation on Friday basically has restricted all outside burning on public lands. And I think that addresses state property. As forest fire warden in Exeter, we have established a prohibition on any, we call it a category 3 fire, open brush, open leaves, open grass. We have a prohibition on that at this time. And that's been in effect for quite a few weeks now. We're still allowing in an approved fire ring or chimney or fire pit, we are still allowing open burning. So restrictions are different for the both. You might have a neighbor or somebody listening might have a neighbor that has a small 2-foot in diameter or less approved fire ring that they can burn at any hour of the day. There are no evening or nighttime restrictions. The next size runs from 2-foot to 4-foot diameter, and that is restricted to after 5 o'clock through the evening hours. And that's typically because the relative humidities kind of climb. Sometimes you can see fog, throughout the fields if you have a good view, and it makes burning of grasses at least more difficult. So we are still allowing in Exeter those 2 outside types of fire in improved fire rings or commercially purchased fire pits, but no open burning of open brush piles, grass, leaves, and things of that nature.
Do you expect that to change?
It would. We have rain on the horizon. So if you're asking if I expect us to prohibit the smaller category 1s and 2s, I don't think it likely. It's very possible if we do continue extremely dry before we get, the typical late October, November rainy season. Going the other way, it's going to take an awful lot of rain, more than an inch or two, to really allow us to, undo the prohibition of outside burning. And I know that disappoints some. But they might have to haul brush to the brush dump as opposed to burning it on site. It's just too risky to do that. But we are monitoring it, and the people at the Hampshire Division of Forest Lands come out weekly with a bulletin. It coincides with the drought monitoring around Thursday or Friday, and obviously we'll follow their lead. We can be more restrictive in Exeter. We can prohibit category 1 and 2. But that is also a lot of people enjoy getting out in the fall and doing some family stuff and toasting marshmallows. And we've tried very hard to be, good neighbors and allow that to happen. And to date, there have been no reports of a smaller 2-foot or 4-foot diameter fire in a ring escaping the control of the homeowner. I won't say that we haven't had calls, people asking about the prohibition and smoke and whatnot, but generally those fires have not caused any kind of fire concern in Exeter. But those larger brush fires, we want to make sure they're not.
Got it. Thanks, Chief.
Cool. Thank you, Molly.
Any other questions for the Chief? Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Murray, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Just wanted to speak to a quick point about Halloween this year. I'm sure many of you saw the CDC came out with its recommendations, posting the traditional trick-or-treat as a high-risk activity. And the state has recently issued some limited guidance as to how to go about Halloween festivities with social distance and mask wearing. The NHMA is coming out with a webinar on, I believe it's Wednesday, that's going to give us more details. So at this time, we as a group haven't come to any recommendations or consensus. We're kind of waiting on that webinar to see what details we can get from that. And hopefully we can provide more insight next week at the next board meeting.
That's good timing, because I was going to suggest that as a board, we put that on the agenda as one of our discussion items, and that would allow it to be posted on the agenda and allow the public to weigh in with their questions or concerns. So that's good timing. Do you have any other updates, James?
No, that is all.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Murray? Great. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I was just going to call him Mr. Bisson, and he, there he is.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to give the board an update. Our fall programs have been underway. We finished with 200 plus athletes playing our sports. We're proud to be happy with that. We were able to space them out well enough so there's plenty of social distancing. There's only one team practicing per night, so there's no chance of teams playing in spontaneous games, which is great. Our after-school enrichment programs are all filling up, and I apologize if you hear a cat meowing right now.
Your cat, Greg?
That is my cat, so I apologize. It's dinner time for the cat.
Wow.
All enrichment, it's going great. I actually taught a Legos class for first and second graders this afternoon, which is like herding cats, no pun intended, which was great. They did an awesome job, and everyone's been really positive and happy. I gotta say, there's not one child or parent complaining about the safety protocols we have in place for any of our things. So it's been a big revelation for us that people are happy to get out and feel some normalcy.
Thank you, Mr. Bisson. I actually took the opportunity, as I live right down the street from the rec park. I walked down one afternoon last week, and I saw the signs, and there's a copy of one of them in our packet, and they're displayed pretty prominently throughout the park. And it was nice to see everybody, all of the parents and the kids, waiting in line 6 feet, distanced, with masks, going through the protocols. Everything seemed to be in order, so I was really happy to see that. So thank you for the efforts that you and your department have put into giving the kids an opportunity to get out and play.
Thank you. One thing that we are going to be looking to put up additionally at the park, since parents aren't really encouraged to go up and watch their children play and they should stay in their car, we're having a few parents that like to idle their cars in the parking lot. We ask that they do not idle, roll down the windows. It's nice out. So we're going to put up some please do not idle signs around the park.
Okay. Good idea. Any questions for Mr. Bisson? Greg, I know you'll be back with us, but why don't you go feed your cat, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Dean.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I didn't have too much. I just wanted to report that we have submitted the initial expense reimbursement request on the election expenses. So we had to clarify a couple of things with the state on that, but we did do that, and that is in their hands. And I just wanted to also echo, I also wanted to thank James and his group. They worked with Darren. I believe Darren was involved in it as well, and created some signage for downtown. And very impressive, good stuff, has the QC reader on it. And by using that, you can link directly to our website, to the mask ordinance, and read it. So I think it's a nice feather in their cap, and a thank you for working through that. And I think Bob Kulacki was involved with that too, right, James? So the very talented Bob was involved in that as well. And then also just to acknowledge the efforts, because I know the phones calls and the emails haven't stopped. We get them regularly. We are obviously working diligently to try to address issues as they come up. And, the team that's been working on this is great. And just to remind everybody to be vigilant, continue to be sensitive and responsible. There's a lot going on in the community right now. There's a lot of things opened up, and people just need to take those precautionary measures and keep working at it. And we appreciate the efforts that people are making. So we're hoping for the best. We had a positive, we know, at PEA. We had 2 at Riverwoods, like were mentioned. And it just shows you that the virus is out there, it's around. So we want everybody to be as safe as they can be.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you to Mr. Bisson, the chiefs, Mr. Murray, Darren, Bob. Everybody's worked real hard through this pandemic. Any questions for Mr. Dean? Okay, we can move on to regular business. There are no abatements, credits, or exemptions. Mr. Bisson, you've arrived back just in time to tell us about the mini loader purchase request.
Yes, as you know, in March of this year, we put in, just to give the board a background, we currently have a 1999 John Deere tractor that doesn't really function very well, and actually is not environmentally friendly either. So we have a lot of things that are working against us. The voters approved $58,000. So working with Mr. Perkins at the Highway Department, we put out specs to all the area tractor dealers, and we got 2 bids back, both Kubotas, one from Chapel Tractor in Brentwood, technically in Milford because they don't sell Kubotas in the Brentwood location, and MB Tractor out of Plastow. Their headquarters are in Elliott, Maine. So as you see there that Mr. Dean's showing, James Rosencrantz and Son actually did not provide a quote because they could not meet our budget threshold. So they didn't even bother putting in a budget. So dealing it down, this is a Kubota that will be used in conjunction with Public Works. So Public Works will be able to access it for smaller projects that they need. MB Tractor actually came in at $56,819, which is under budget, and it allows us the versatility to complete anything from simple landscaping to cleanups during construction projects and snow removal.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Bisson on the mini loader? Mr. Dean, I lost my participant screen. Do you see any hands up?
One moment.
If you stop sharing the screen, I can.
Actually, you can bring it up by clicking on the top participants, maybe.
Yeah, no, I did that before, and that worked. I just didn't know if you saw.
No hands up.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to award the mini loader sale to MB Tractor for $56,819 and allow the Parks and Recreation to surplus out the 1999 John Deere tractor.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then next we have a request for approval of an address change on 7 Hampton Road. Mr. Dean or Chief Wilking, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. This came out of the E911 committee. Mm-hmm. Basically, this is a piece of property that is owned by Frank Ferraro, and this was a voluntary change that they signed off on with the E911 committee. So you can see it's to change the address number from 7 Hampton Road to 7 Hampton Road Unit 1 and 7 Hampton Road Unit 2. So a betting man. I am not on this, but I would say it's becoming a duplex from a single family. Two family, one family to two family. So all the board needs to do is just approve this change.
Okay, so the motion would be to
approve the voluntary change of address of 7 Hampton Road to 7 Hampton Road, Unit 1,
Unit
7. Yeah.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion at this time if there are no questions.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the application for a voluntary change of address for 7 Hampton Road to Unit 1, 7 Hampton Road, and Unit 2, 7 Hampton Road.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next we have the town manager's report. Mr. Dean?
Okay, so obviously this week upcoming, you mentioned it, Mr. Chairman, we have budget committee Wednesday night on Zoom. Also, there is, for those of you who can make it, I just wanted to remind everybody there's a tour of the library at 10 o'clock on Thursday. Hope will be there, and she'll have Bowen, the builder, as well, and I believe the architect as well. So if you're interested in a progress tour and you'd like to go over and see it, just like we always say, mask up, bring your sanitizer, and we'll get a tour of the library. And let's see, other things of note. Riverwoods has filed for an abatement. I just wanted to bring that up with the board and make sure you're aware of it. They are looking at the value of their property versus what the town valued it at. And the process for that is when somebody contests their value, you can either go to BTLA, which is the State Bureau of Tax and Land Appeals, or you can go to the Superior Court. And Riverwoods has chosen to take the Superior Court route. So that is going to be in play, and the town will have to work its way through that process. So just wanted to let you know of that, and we'll be getting back to that. And I did mention the audit closing conference, the permits, and I was able to attend a Downeaster Station Operation Committee meeting last week on Zoom. And that was also very interesting because it made me think about how those meetings are typically held, which is you get on a train and you spend half a day going somewhere and then probably a quarter of a day coming back or whatever it is. And there were about 22 people on the call. So I've mentioned to a couple of you that I've seen that these virtual meetings really, really are great for regional meetings. And maybe we'll see that trend continue in the future, no matter what happens with the virtual meeting side. Seems to save a lot of fossil fuel use for sure. So there's that. The other thing I want to mention too is I was able to attend a gathering of some of my colleagues last Friday, and the issue of Indigenous Peoples Day came up, and some of the initiatives that some other towns are taking with respect to that. So I wanted to put that out to the board for you to give some thought to, and whether we wanted to do something on that as well. And so I think that was everything I had, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any questions for the town manager? Okay. Thanks again, Mr. Dean. Seeing none, we'll move on to select board committee reports. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, did you have any meetings?
I was unable to attend the recent Swayze Parkway trustee meeting, which was on past Wednesday night. So I don't have an update for you on that.
Was it a meeting or was it a?
It was a site walk meeting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Selectman Brown.
The communications committee, we're delaying a 1 week because of schedule conflicts, reviewing the website, and then pushing the survey forward. And then Facilities Committee sent its recommendation, sent a letter to the BRC about recommending approval of the Public Works garage and the public safety analysis.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
The only thing I have to report from since our last meeting was a wonderful day at UNH where no veto was overturned. So we had record-breaking bad time. Depending on your side, I'm sorry. But it was not pleasant. And I have nothing coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. And Selectwoman Cowan.
So the E911 committee decided to conduct its business through the select board since it was not a controversial change. Planning board, yes, we had a light meeting. By that I mean 2 of the applicants asked for a continuation and we still somehow ended up in a meeting until 10. But it feels like we're making some progress and we have a good time. And then I have Parks and Rec Advisory Committee tomorrow night.
Very good, thank you. I did not have any committee meetings. Sustainability will be meeting on the 6th of October. Okay, so moving along to correspondence, we've got quite a bit of correspondence to review. The first of which, Mr. Dean, is a letter that you wrote to Senator Shaheen. Did you want to just comment to that quickly?
Sure, I can do that. Yes, I sent a letter to Senator Shaheen about the state aid grant program. We've been working with Peter Clark out of the senator's office, and they've been very, very good about working with us in terms of trying to address our state aid grant shortfall that was the subject of an article in Seacoast Online over the weekend, if you saw the Seacoast Sunday. So as I've said before, as you're sort of out and about, if you can, and you see your legislators and other people that have an impact on this process, if you can just remind them that we would love to see our state aid grant funds and get it to governor and council so we can get the money. And through whatever means is possible, whether it's the state or the federal government. And I know our senators have been very responsive to us so far.
Okay. And we have correspondence from Coast relative to a credit, Mr. Dean?
Yeah, so they went through a process and we are going to get a credit back from Coast as well, based upon the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic. So the third page of that correspondence has the amount. It's 1,700. I'm looking at it, 1,700. So we fund 20,000. So they'll be giving back that piece, $1,700.
Okay. Next, we had correspondence from the Black Lives Matter Seacoast that was sent to state legislators, county attorneys, sheriff and current police chiefs, Board of Aldermen, selectmen, mayors, town councils, candidates for school board. I did reach out to Tanisha, who sent this. There was also an invitation to an event, and unfortunately, I misread the date. I thought it was in October, and it turns out it was, I believe, a week ago Saturday, and I had a conflict, so I was unable to attend. But we'll obviously keep communications open with BLM Seacoast and Tanisha. And then, Mr. Dean, can you explain the next, the station report, the Downeaster?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Before you do, Selectwoman Gilman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things in that in the letter we were just talking about was that they're looking for detailed response as to what our actions may be or what our plan may be. And I was wondering how we want to take care of that. I can do. I haven't received this as a state rep yet. I have to say, but I saw that, and I personally will have something that I will be able to respond to. I just didn't know if the board wanted to have a full.
We certainly can. In reading over it, there was the first 5 bullets. To some degree, if we're not doing it, we're looking into doing it. And we can certainly respond as a board if the board would like.
I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah. So I'd open it up for discussion from the board.
I think someone has to make a stab at answering the questions before, or I don't know. We can all start throwing things out there to put together.
Obviously, our response will be, we'll review it collectively as a board. I'm happy to take a first draft if the board is willing to charge me with that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and perhaps work with Chief Pullen.
So I offered to do it, but then you offered to do it, so
I'd be happy to have you do it.
You want and I'm happy to do it. Okay.
Just to try to toss something in there too, I think for this board, what you'd be focused on is the candidates for mayor, town councils, or board of selectmen.
Correct.
Section. So
yes.
School board's their department, candidates for sheriff, and I guess, there's current police chiefs here too. There are candidates for county attorney and candidates for state legislature. So I just wanted to point that out because the correspondence is broken up into sections. And,
right.
we only have one candidate for state rep with us tonight, and that's you, Julie. So that's all you.
And to be clear, I was looking at the 6 bullet points that were for mayor, town council, board of aldermen, selectmen. So we're in agreement. Those are the 6 that.
Yeah, now that I'm reading it, I realize because I'm wearing 2 hats that this was addressed to me more as a candidate for state rep as opposed to for select board. So never mind. I will make my own statement back to Black Lives Matter. And thank you. So I'm done.
So, Mr. Dean, to that point, would we ask Chief Pullen to address the bullets directly above the Board of Selectmen or Select Board?
I'm happy to have a conversation with the chief about the list. I just think that he should be the one to make that decision as far as what he feels comfortable responding to or not.
No, I think
he should really be the one doing that. So that would be my ask, is that we give it to him and then have him review it. And if he chooses to take a route of maybe meeting with the organization, which is, as we heard tonight, that's something that he's done, or however he wants to handle it. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
I agree.
That would be my preference.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just want to follow up that they're really talking to the candidates and want to see candidates who are going to push in and deliberate and come through with the changes that they're looking for. So now that I'm really absorbing it, I don't think it's something that the whole board needs to consider. But if you want to give me input as a state rep, I would love to have that.
Okay.
So I can meet with Chief Pullen, as I.
Okay. Thank you. Thoughts and comments from the rest of the board? Okay.
I just, sorry, Nico, have you had a conversation with Tanisha as of yet? Because I know that, we didn't respond all, obviously, to the initial message that was sent out.
No, I responded when the email came out. I responded to her and asked her and indicated that I'd like an opportunity to sit down and talk with her. And that's when she reminded me of the event. And when I read, and that cover letter is not attached here, but if you read the cover letter, it said October 10th, which I think was a typo because then it said this Saturday. I saw the date. And then when she reminded me that it was actually that Saturday, I wasn't available.
Oh, because there is an event on the 10th.
Okay.
Right. So maybe I could be incorrect for which event. There are numerous events, but there is an event on the 10th that I know that they're hosting. I just want to make sure that we take the time to have a conversation with them to flesh out any questions that we may have about the demands and the letter that was sent out, so that we're all on the same page and not making assumptions about what it is that they're hoping for. Because I don't think it's just for candidates who are running for office. I think it's touching upon incumbents who are seated currently, and sort of the messages that they send out, because I know that there was an issue for, I forget which town it was, but there was some visceral reaction to statements that were made by a currently seated select board member.
Yep.
So I think that was the catalyst to the letter that was sent out to all of the towns across the seacoast. But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and have accurate.
I do too. No, I do too. And that's why I'm asking, because I'm happy to, number one, respond and put something in writing for the board to review. And also, as I said, I responded to her right after we got the email. And I misread. I saw October 10th, and it was actually an event in Dover, I think. And again,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
I'll reach back out to her this week.
Yeah, that would be great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. I have two hands up, Selectwoman Cowan and then Selectwoman Gilman.
Levy, maybe this would be a question for you. Do you think it would make sense to have, to reach out to Tanisha to come and have a conversation with the board, like put her on the agenda?
I think that would make the most sense, so that they have an opportunity and we have an opportunity to have an open discussion about exactly what it is that they want and what we can do and where the meeting point can be. Because I don't think it's fair to put this all on Chief Poulin either, because it was clearly directed at select board members, other departments within the town. So I think to do our due diligence, we should ask if she would like to come onto the select board meeting to present and then have a discussion about it. Yes. So yes, Molly.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
To that point, Selectwoman Roundtree, I will include that and give her the dates of our meetings and see what works best for her schedule.
Very much.
Of course, yeah. Julie, did you still have something or? No, okay, all right. Okay, Mr. Dean, can you speak to the Downeaster schedule? You're muted still.
Yes, I can do that. Let me, it's great to be muted. So this is the Exeter Station report. We got this last week at the Downeaster meeting, and it's a very interesting read because what it shows is the ridership by month. And you can see in August of 2019 all the way up to March of 2020, things were as you would expect they would be. And then COVID hits, Downeaster slows down to a grinding halt and stops operating more or less. And so these are the April, May, June, and July numbers. And so you can see just the drop off in ridership. And then this is since the reopening has occurred, how many ons and offs they have as well. So this is a little bit different than the top column because this one's by month and this actually starts looking at it by week. And you can see, like, for the month of August, basically there were probably, I'm just adding them up in my head, but about 400 boardings, whereas in August of 19, you're talking 4285. So they're interesting statistics. I think we all love the Downeaster. It's a great community resource we've had for a long time. But we're beginning to see and in Dover, I added Dover to this report too. So the trends, you can see them and they're pretty much the same. So the long and short of it is when the train's going to come back is anyone's guess. But at this point, it actually starts looking like there is not, again, a lot of people still working from home. Is this going to be a longer term trend? It'll be very interesting to see kind of what happens down the road. There was a lot of discussion at the Downeaster meeting about, people either going back to the office or not going back to the office. And it's, aside from one commenter, it seemed to be the general sense of a lot of people was that people were remoting and working from home, and that it may be the start of not just a COVID-19 reaction, but maybe a longer term trend. So we will see. But they're operating, they're doing okay. They've had support through the CARES Act and so forth. So things are okay that way for Amtrak. But we will keep our eye on it for sure, and I'll be continuing to participate in the meetings month to month with the different groups.
Thank you.
Yes.
We received notice from the Town of Kingston Planning Board as the Town of Exeter is granted a butter status on a project that they will be hearing tomorrow night at their planning board meeting. Mr. Dean, is that something that we should attend, or do we have staff that would attend? Do I attend?
Obviously, it's a public hearing, so you're welcome to attend if you want. It's a Zoom meeting, so if you have some time and you're interested in it, you can Zoom in. Dave is going to. He will. Dave Sharple's our planner. He has told me that he is planning on Zooming in just to put a marker down on stormwater issues, and I think that's it. But if you're interested in this, it's definitely a big project, 800,000 square feet. Yeah. We don't know who the end user is, but at 800,000 square feet, I think the guesses are probably limited to a few significant players, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, so that's the process that they've laid out for this.
Okay. And if anyone's interested, the Zoom information is listed in the packet. And next is your application for a renewal for the Board of Directors.
Right. So the Health Trust has, I am planning on putting in for another term. I've been serving on the Health Trust Board for, I think, 6 years now. And this is my application to the board. So if you have any questions about that or what the role is of a board member on the Board of Directors, just let me know. The process for this is it's submitted to the organization and they go through the governance and nominating committee, of which I'm the chair, so I'll recuse myself from this conversation. But the slate of candidates goes from governance and nominating to the full board, and then the candidates are voted on at the annual meeting of the Health Trust. So, and for those who don't know, the Health Trust is about a $360 million a year operation. So they represent probably 75%. And if I get this wrong, Wendy will let me know, but I think it's 75% of public employees in the state that have health benefits go through the Health Trust. So it's a large scale organization.
Well, I fully support, you continuing to sit on that board. As everybody knows, my day job, the Board of Directors that I report to are people like Mr. Dean, town managers and select people. So it's really good exposure for the town of Exeter. I think for you to continue serving on the board if you're reelected. And certainly, you can bring the perspectives of other communities back to us. So I hope that works out for you.
Thanks.
And the next was correspondence, Mr. Dean, that you copied me on back and forth between a resident. I thought PEA gave a pretty robust response, and it seems as if he was satisfied with the response.
Seemed like it.
Okay. Next, we have a notice from the James St. Jean Auctioneers regarding the State of New Hampshire surplus property webcast auction. Mr. Dean, do we typically participate in that?
We haven't really in the past. We do more with trade when we surplus. So we really haven't, just because of the location. But it's good to know that it exists, and any given year we could look at it as a potential option for ourselves.
And next we have correspondence from the Water and Sewer Manager, Mr. Berube, to somebody inquiring about power wash. We have an email from a resident supporting Halloween in Exeter, and again, we'll have that on our agenda next week for those that want to listen in and come on and comment. We have a Park Street Common Memorial Tree Celebration. Eileen Flockhart is heading up a community initiative to memorialize the lives of 3 neighborhood citizens, and she's organized a grassroots fundraiser to plant 3 trees to memorialize these residents. My understanding is that family members from out of state, out of town have been invited. It is scheduled for September 30th at 3:30. Of course, everybody will be masked up and social distancing. I did follow up with Ms. Flockhart Sunday evening, and after discussions back and forth with Mr. Perkins and Ms. Perry of the DPW in regards to the drought and the potential of the trees not making it through the winter, Eileen has come up with a revised initiative, and that they'll still go forward with the celebration, but they actually won't plant the trees until next spring. And that's it for correspondence. And Mr. Dean, I plan to go to that Wednesday at 3:30. Reviewing the board calendar, we have a holiday coming up on October 12th, and we also have the election on November 3rd. So my suggestion, I'd like to kind of shoot out through October and November. And we'll have our next meeting next Monday on October 5th, followed by October 19th. Then followed up by October 26th because of the election. I don't think that any of us wanted to participate in the election for 15 or 16 hours after a select board meeting. So we look at October 5th, October 19th, the 26th, November 9th, and November 23rd. Are there any objections from the board? Selectwoman Gilman, I see your hand up.
Yes, my comment is actually on the last topic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, I really appreciate the work that this ad hoc committee has done to make Exeter, or get Exeter the recognition as a tree city. I'm a little concerned about when we start planting on town property. Is it part of any master plan? And if not, should it be? And, this came out of nowhere to me, planting on Park Street Common, and I don't know where it is. And then there's the whole aspect of the memorials too, the stone memorials. Lovely, lovely idea. But if we start kind of, whoever asks first gets an okay on this, is there a stop to it? I think we need to have a little bit more discussion with the Public Works and/or Parks and Rec about it, because we end up with the care of these things. And again, I really appreciate this project and how it's going forward, but it's our responsibility in the end. So somehow I have to talk to the town planner and Parks and Rec and our tree warden and get an idea of what we want to do going forward. Maybe this is part of the cultural arts and culture committee aspect too.
Mr. Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, and Selectwoman Gilman, that's an excellent point, but I was under the understanding that these were replacing existing trees that are not doing well. Is that correct, Mr. Dean? You're muted. Russ, you're muted.
Sorry, I was getting some static in the line. That's why I muted. There's some static out there somewhere. I understood that I believe all the action on this is coming out of this tree committee, subcommittee to the Conservation Commission, and I actually had the agenda shared screen, so if people wanted to see all the details on Park Street Common, that's where they would tune in and participate. I don't know if anybody's seen any of the meetings, but I know Greg and Jay, I believe from Public Works, are both doing it, so that's the group. I mean, they've been leading the charge, and we've been participating in it, so it's just a matter of how you want to handle that. But to your question, Mr. Chairman, I believe so. But I'd have to watch that meeting. That's one of the ones, unfortunately, I haven't been able to put on in the background. So, but it's the Exeter Tree Committee, and it's a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. So I guess they set it up.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so back to the calendar. Any objections from the board on those 5 dates through November? Ms. Selectman Brown? Okay. Okay. With that, if there are no other questions, comments, or issues, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
I am sad that we are ending so early.
I know. Clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.